Hi everybody, so today we're going to be doing a video on how to make your own recycled paper and sew your own booklet. Step 1, cutting the paper into smaller pieces. So you have to get all your scrap paper that you want to use for this project and rip them all up in smaller pieces. After that, you have to leave it to soak, and the reason we do this is because if you don't leave it to soak and put them in smaller pieces, is that when you go to blend it up in your blender, it will burn out your blender, which is not a good idea. Anyway, so continue ripping your heart out with this, all your scrap papers. Card also works, and toilet paper, like cotton things, they also work for this project. I'm just adding water here, and you have to add the water until it goes on top. So second, blend the paper into a pulp. The pulp is the thing that's going to leave your paper to become a paper. So what you do is basically blend the paper until it turns into little paper chunks. So this is what I was telling you. I soaked this for 24 hours, and what happened is I blended it all up in the blender. Here I'm just getting the paper that I did previously, which it just basically absorbed all the water that I left it soaking in. So I just blended that up with more water. Very important, add more water when you're blending it, because the water will help your blender not jam and burn. Okay, so I just continue doing this for a bit. So, yep, enjoy the process. Okay, so part 3, making the pump into sheets / straining it. So unfortunately I had filmed this and didn't realize that I wasn't recording for most of it, so the clip will cut out later on, but I will just tell you and give you a tutorial verbally on how you do this. So you add more water to your pulp. That is very important, and you see, I don't know if you'll see it, but I added more water because if you see here, I was struggling with the pulp. So basically, if you don't have enough water, then the pulp can't flow properly. But yeah, so use clear glue. It's really important. Clear glue or PVA glue. Do not use wood glue or anything. Will help your pulp when it's drying to stick better to each other and be more intact. So again, I'm really struggling with these pieces of paper because I didn't add enough water. So I think I go in and add more water any minute now. But yeah, basically, for this process to be smoother, you need to add more water. There you go. Because it makes the pulp flow more nicer, which then lets you absorb more water in, makes it flatten nicer, if that makes sense. Anyway, so after this process, I'm going to shortly pick up the frame again, and this frame is called a frame and deckle, I think. Basically, you can make this out of a old canvas frame, and just with some mesh, and just staple it at the back. Lots of tutorials online on how to do that. So it flows much nicer now, as I can tell. And now you have to let it strain for a bit. So this, I'd say like a minute or 2. Try and get as much water out of it as possible, because the more water you get out, the quicker it dries, and your paper sheets will be ready quicker. So with the sponge, I'm just lightly tapping it and squeezing out the excess water. whilst on the frame. Just because mine was a bit thick, so I thought it'd be easier if I do it on the frame. Now I had these random pieces of cloth that I previously had from a art project, so I just used that for this process. So again, as I was saying before, I'm just trying to squeeze out the excess water into the bucket so I'm not losing any water. And here I'm just using the sponge again. I'm sorry that footage is a bit wobbly. I'm using my tripod on here. So anyway, let the paper dry. So I was thinking in my head, where am I going to leave the paper to dry? So I decided to peg it to my radiator, and I left this to dry for 24 hours. So as you can see, I just pegged it to the radiator. Next, I'm going to show you how to sew your own booklet. So I'm going to show you how to sew your own booklet. This is my favourite part of the whole thing. So first we're going to start off by folding our paper. Because I made the mould and it was square, I had to configure it in a reasonable way. So I'm just going to cut them into small squares. So whether I do it lengthwise or shortwise, it doesn't really matter because it's a square. So this is really important when you're making handmade paper and you're making a booklet out of it, is to tape your edge. This is important because it gives stability to your paper. If you use a lot of glue whilst you're making the paper, this is unnecessary. But if your paper is quite thick and needs support when having any indentation to it or any heavy impact that you'll see we'll do in a minute, is a very good idea to just tape it. Thinner paper will work way better for this. The thicker paper is a bit difficult to tape at first, but it will work if you just continue to apply pressure on the tape. So here I'm just cutting them into smaller squares. As I said, I'm just trying to configure my notebook the way I want it. Again, you can make them into triangles, squares, rectangles, whatever shape you want. You can still use the same stitching. So yeah. So here is where you mark your paper. So this is important because when you're marking your paper, this mark is going to show you exactly where you want your holes to go, and they will align your papers up for when you want to start stitching them. So as you can see here, basically I'm getting my supplies ready. So what you need is a needle and some thread, an awl, and a pen and pencil. To be honest, if you want to freehand the pen and pencil bit and just poke holes, you can do that too. I just recommend marking yours so your papers are aligned. But yeah, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. So here I'm just doing a knot, a simple knot, a loop knot. Nothing, it's just an ordinary knot, nothing hard, very basic. So what you want to do is use your awl, which is this device I'm going to show you now. So this is called an awl. It basically pokes hole into leather, I think it's used, and book binding. Be very careful with this because I poked my finger before when I didn't see my finger behind it, so just be very conscious on where your fingers are behind your paper. So yeah, you just poke those marks we did previously to make the hole for the needle. Now I'm just aligning my paper to fit in where it should be, yeah, if you mark them with a ruler it would be way more easier to tell, but I didn't, which is fine. But yeah, it depends on if you want to risk it or not. So you start from under the paper to hide the knot, and then you just go to the other piece of paper to stitch them together. So you just go under, over for this bit. So a lot of people would do this under, over bit with their cover of their book, whether that be a soft book or a hardcover book, but I just decided that I like the paper, so I'm going to use that as a cover instead. So yeah, for this process you're just going to go like that, and at the end you're going to knot it, well not knot it, but you can loop it, and then you're going to go outwards but not into the other paper. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go into the next paper after you loop it around the stitch you just did, and you're going to continue that. So go over, loop it, and then go back into the stitch you just the hole you just took your needle out of. So we just continue into the hole, loop it, back into the hole, in and out and loop, basically. Yeah, you just continue that process until you have finished your papers. This takes a bit of practice, but you'll get used to it eventually. At the ends, I like to double loop it just so the design can be coherent with each other, cohesive with each other. So yeah, I'm just doing that, looping it, it's pushing it back into where the thread is, and then continuing that. And this is giving you a bit of a preview of the inside of the box whilst I'm doing this. So yeah, and it gives this really nice looped combined stitch, which I personally really like, and is really nice with a black or brown board. It just is very apparent, and the contrast is really nice. So now after you do that, you're going to just knot it. So what I like to do is loop it around the previous thread, and then just loop it again, and then leave a little loop, and then pull the loop out, and then that's it. So then you cut that off, and now we're going to go to the next part, and this part is actually making the slash painting on, adding basically the watercolor ground. So this is a core watercolor ground, and basically what this does is gives you a layer on top of the paper, a bit like gesso, to make the watercolor not seep through the paper. So it's just like a gesso for watercolor. I think I bought this one for like £5 or £10 from Core. Core is the one that is the most famous for watercolor ground. If you're doing acrylic or anything, you can just use gesso for this bit. They have a transparent one. Core has a transparent one, and they have a white one, which I'm using the white for this process. So they do say to leave it to dry for 24 hours, but what I have found that if you just heat dry it, then it's very quick to dry. So that's what I'm just doing here. This is washable off your hands, but yeah, I just continue to do this for all the pages. I found I didn't need a second layer, but if you want to do a second layer, just go ahead. So yeah. So I'm just using my heat gun here to show you that you can dry it with a heat gun. It's recommended to be 24 hours, but yeah, I just like using a heat gun. I think it's faster, and you're still able to paint on it. So I just clamp this and wait for it to dry. I hope you enjoyed this video and this tutorial. Please subscribe and like, and check out my previous videos where I show you how my previous videos and how I show you how to make slash paint other things, and check out my next videos on where I show you how to make watercolor paint and how to paint your own landscape. Thank you.